Hi everyone, welcome back to Mind to Market Media. I'm Charles Lawson, and today I've got my very special guest back with me, Peter Nelson from Gemology for Schmucks. Now, if you haven't checked him out, check him out at the link below. He's got a lot of cool content on there, mostly around your foundational gemology, bit of gemstones, bit of jewelry. But Peter, why don't you give us a quick lowdown on yourself?
Yeah, so mostly I'm known for Gemology for Schmucks, the YouTube channel. I'm a jeweler and gemologist here in Bangkok, Thailand, and I predominantly deal with collectible pieces.
Very cool. So for part two today, we're going to talk about something quite close to my heart, which is Australian opal, but specifically about the comparison between Australian opal and Ethiopian opal, because that's quite a hot topic at the moment, and something I think is really worth looking into. So what can you tell us about that?
It's an absolute pleasure to talk about opals because they are so different from everything else in the market, and I think at this point we really have to go to the studio. Now, opals are just special. They're different from every other kind of gemstone in pretty much every way. The way they form is different, the way you evaluate them, the way you appreciate them, all different. But two of the major sources of opals are going to be Australia and a recent hot shot on the field, Ethiopian opals. And if you come to a gem market like Bangkok, you can find tons and tons of Ethiopian opals. So let's look at what are the differences, what are the similarities, and what do you need to know? Phenomenal opal, or precious opal, is basically made up of silica gel spheres, and if they're properly organized, you get that play of color. Some people like to call it opalescence, but that's incorrect. The play of color comes because of the size of those spheres and their proper orientation, which is why when you move it around in light, you get flashes of red, flashes of green, flashes of purple. It all comes down to the organization of those gel spheres. Because they formed in these ancient seas. Those gel spheres sunk to the bottom, and then over incredibly long periods of time, they settled and lithified. They turned into stone. So places that used to be ancient seas that have since dried out, hello Australia, are the places that you will find opals. And you can also find opals in some other places like Mexico, typically fire opal. And not all opals have that play of color, which is why we call it phenomenal opal. There are several unique things about the Australian deposits of opals, because they occur in several different areas of the continent. And the key things for collectability in Australian opal, from my point of view, is that there are unique patterns that you don't really find in other locations. And so when you're thinking about collecting things, verifiable uniqueness is one of the features of collectability. So if you talk to the Australians in depth, somebody who really loves opal, they have dozens of names for the types of patterns that occur in their opals. Can Ethiopian opals be beautiful? Absolutely. But because they don't have those same patterns that Australian has, there's a different level and different type of collectability. Aside from those patterns, Australia is also one of the unique places that has black opals, and they have some of the finest black opals in the world, which is also why they're some of the most expensive opals in the world. Finding the right patterns on a nice black body color and with the right display of colors, because the balance of which flashes of color you get heavily affects the price. All of those things make Australian opals an incredibly collectible item. In Ethiopia, you find incredibly beautiful stones as well, with strong flashes of color, all the same colors that you'd expect from Australian, but in different patterns. And in fact, more commonly, you see only a handful of patterns in Ethiopia, which makes them less collectible. Add on top of that the supply of Ethiopian opal is quite high. That makes them a lot more affordable. And one last thing that's important to talk about is that the type of deposit is different. So in Ethiopian opals, 80% of the supply, to my understanding, is what we call hydrophane. These hydrophane opals attract water readily. And if they attract that extra water into the body of the stone, it can mute the color completely until it gets a chance to dry out. And that can take some time. And one of the things that is a knock-on effect of that is, think about it, if you're wearing an opal and you got sweat and you got all these other things from the environment around you getting absorbed in with that water into the stone, the chances that it changes the color of that stone are very real. That's with hydrophane opals. Not all Ethiopian opals are hydrophane, but a significant supply, something like 80%, is hydrophane. The remaining 20% from the opal cutters that I've read from say that they cut and behave in a very similar way to the Australian opals. It's important to point out that all opal deposits can have hydrophane opals, and that includes Australia. According to an article from the GIA, to safely check if an opal is hydrophane, we can put a small drop of water on the surface of the stone and inspect if it readily absorbs into the surface under magnification. The more hydrophane opals will absorb the drop gradually. With less porous stones, the drop of water will remain there and eventually evaporate. So should we be collecting that quality of opal in the same way, perhaps even the same price point as Australian? I don't know. I'm not here to set the rules of the market. But if I'm looking at opals, I'm definitely looking at collectability. I want to know my stone is beautiful, rare, and if there's any treatments, I want to know about them. And it better be reflected in the price. And that's my perspective about opals. Charles?
I do love opals, and I do love learning about opals. And if you want to learn more about gemology, you can catch our third part of the series, which is going to be about gemstone treatments and whether or not they are actually acceptable or not. If you do want to catch these videos, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Also jump on and subscribe to Gemology for Schmucks. A lot of more content coming up there, a lot of cool stuff. And otherwise, we'll see you next time.